Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing a book review on Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. In Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, we follow a young woman who becomes the second wife to a wealthy, recently widowed man. As the new mistress of Manderley, our narrator feels as though she is not cut out for her new position, and learns more and more about Rebecca, her husband's first wife, who died tragically at sea. Everyone seems to have loved Rebecca, and she was the model of perfection and virtue, everything that the narrator feels she is not. Full of atmospheric suspense, Rebecca is a novel about marriage and secrets, all leading to shocking revelations. I have finally read the classic Rebecca, you guys. I feel like if you are a reader, a lover of literature, I feel like Rebecca is one of those books that is a must and you gotta get to eventually at some point, whether or not you love it or hate it, you know? Because it's a classic for a reason, and I feel like it's one of those classics everybody needs to read to form an opinion on. Because yeah, you'll either love it or hate it, like I said. So yeah, I have finally read this book, you guys. It's been on my to read for like ever, okay? Because I've heard nothing but good things about this book for like the longest time. Yeah, like pretty positive reviews. I have primarily only ever seen positive reviews. Every now and then I'll kind of see negative reviews for it, but yeah, for the most part I've always seen extremely positive reviews. And to my great joy and surprise, I have never been spoiled by this book. How is that possible? When it comes to classic literature, whether that's something from Jane Austen or William Shakespeare or Charles Dickens or something, you know, when it comes to classic literature, a lot of times stuff like that has kind of been ingrained into pop culture, knowledge of some sort, and a lot of times, even if you've never read a certain piece of classic literature, a lot of times you're kind of already aware of certain plot points and characters, and you're already aware of spoilers. Like Romeo and Juliet, for instance. I think just about everybody knows how Romeo and Juliet ends, even if you've not read it, because it's so ingrained in pop culture. And yeah, I definitely would consider Rebecca a classic of literature, but for some odd reason, I have never been spoiled about this book, and people have always been so careful about spoilers, I've noticed, which is very interesting. So it was really nice to head into this book knowing absolutely nothing about it. I honestly did not know what to expect. All I knew was kind of the surface details, which was a young woman who becomes the second wife of an older man, and yet his first wife was named Rebecca. That's all I've known, and that's kind of all you really need to know. What is so brilliant about this book is that it has this tension and suspense and this really gothic atmosphere. And as you're reading it, it's like you have these tingling feelings, you know, you have these tingling feelings and suspicions, but you're not quite sure what to make of them, you know? Like, are you the reader just kind of being a little over-paranoid? Are you overthinking things? Because as you're reading, you do get this sense like something doesn't feel quite right. But what exactly is it? You know what I mean? It's kind of one of those books that it's not like a horror book, it's not really a thriller, but it does kind of have that atmospheric sense of suspense and tension at times, which is kind of odd, because yeah, you're kind of sitting there thinking, why do I feel that way? But you feel that way nonetheless, because something just feels off. You know, something feels tilted, like a tilted picture on a wall or something, and you have this urge to like fix it, you know? So it's that type of book. So, like I said, as you're reading, you the reader, I think, have a sense of paranoia, and I think it is mostly kind of due to the narrator. Our narrator has a sense of paranoia, and you're constantly questioning, okay, is she paranoid? Is she just misinformed? Is she just miscommunicating certain things? What is it exactly? And most importantly, what is up with the mysterious wife, Rebecca? Rebecca's name literally is on every single page of this story. And that's another interesting thing to talk about with this book, which I think a lot of people know about this detail already. But yeah, if you're not aware, the narrator, because if you've noticed, I've just been calling the narrator the narrator. She is never once given a name. The only time she's kind of referenced, because her husband is Max de Winter, so when she marries Max de Winter, a lot of people do refer to her as Mrs. de Winter. But yeah, that was also Rebecca's title. Rebecca used to be Mrs. de Winter. So yeah, our narrator, you never know her name, but you do get these little hints and teases about her name, because I think Max at one point, or Maxim, she tends to call him, Maxim, Maxim says something about her name is really pretty and unusual, and then, yeah, even the narrator at one point makes a note that her name is written on a piece of paper and it's spelled correctly for once. So yeah, it's like, what is her name? It has to be something exotic and unusual for the time period that someone might misspell, but it's at the same time it sounds like a pretty name. So that's one of the big things about this novel that I really appreciated. You know, why exactly is our narrator nameless? But I think there's just a lot of deep meaning within that, because our narrator, she's very shy and timid. She has very low self-esteem. She thinks very lowly of herself. And yeah, she kind of comes from more of a middle-class position. And yeah, she's just so confused about why Max de Winter, why he even married her, does he even love her? And on the opposite end of that spectrum, you have Rebecca, who, you know, prior to her tragic death, which is not a spoiler because you know she's dead off the bat. Rebecca was like the life of the party. She was this picture perfect model of perfection and virtue. Like she was a perfect ideal, you know, someone to be put on a pedestal. And yeah, everybody seems to speak highly of her, has a lot of praise towards her. So yeah, our narrator just feels like she can't compare to that. And yeah, my opinion is probably not new, because I feel like this is probably definitely what a lot of people think, because I feel like that's why the narrator is nameless, because she just doesn't feel like she can compete to Rebecca. You know, that her own name is worthless and not valid, and no one cares about her. But yet Rebecca screams on every page. The name is on every page, just practically every paragraph sometimes. So it is an interesting choice by Daphne du Maurier to make the narrator nameless, you know, but it's definitely done, I think, with intent and purpose, and yeah, for you, the reader, to kind of figure out why is she nameless, you know, why, what is the point of her being nameless, exactly. And I think the more you get into the book and the deeper you get into it, and as things are kind of revealed, you start to understand why, I think. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. The pacing is a really good pace. I think for some people it might read too slow, but it never really read that way to me. I mean, I personally like the pace. I was never bored. I was always intrigued, because it's like, I want to know what's going on here exactly. Am I being paranoid? Am I overthinking things, you know? It reads very well, and yet for a classic this was written in 1938. For a book written that long ago, I think it still holds up incredibly well. It's very easy to read. You know, it doesn't read like something from Charles Dickens or Jane Austen, you know, because sometimes those books can be a little bit more difficult to read, and yet they can be very heavy on symbolism and imagery, and you gotta read into all that stuff. So yeah, this book is very, very straightforward, you know. It's not heavy on imagery and symbolism, you know. So it does. It makes it much easier to read. It makes it more relatable, even though it was written in 1938. And I mean, there are a few little problematic things here and there in there, because sometimes something might come across, like nowadays, it would be sexist. You know, something in here, you're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe something was worded that way. That would be sexist nowadays. Yeah, there's one character who is like mentally handicapped in this, and some of the language in regards to him, it's kind of like, oh, that's offensive nowadays. You definitely wouldn't be wording it that way. You know, little things like that that do date the book, but I think, you know, as long as you acknowledge those little things, and you're aware of the time period and the language of the time period. Just don't let little things like that bother you, you know. So yeah, I loved the book. I'm glad I finally read it. A great story that's really suspenseful, that somehow I never got spoiled with. A really great cast of characters. There's just such a great cast. You guys, some of these characters, you love them, you hate them. Some of them are very mysterious, and every character has a place in the narrative. You know, every character has a place. You may be introduced to somebody earlier in the novel and they're gone for quite a long time, but they come back in the end in a big way for some reason. So yeah, every character has a point and a purpose that you understand as the novel progresses. So I definitely recommend this if you love classic literature, especially in the 1900s. Very easy to read, very enjoyable, and yeah, if you're a lover of literature, I think this is a must. So you guys, that is it for my review of Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. In the comments below, have you guys read this book? You probably have read this book, because I feel like I am the last person on earth to read this book, to be quite honest. I'm sure that's not the case, I exaggerate, but still, I feel like the last person on earth to have read this book. So yeah, have you read this book? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Just let me know your thoughts down below. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye guys.